All right, so I want to officially welcome everyone who's joining us live. And then for those of you who are joining us via the recording a little bit later, we're going to open our time together with a brief practice, just so you can get the tiniest bit of a taste of what's to come through our experiences together with the yoga and the tantra and the yogic and tantric meditations of this tradition. So I'll invite you just to find a comfortable seat. That can be on a chair, it can be on the floor, whatever makes you happiest. So give yourself a minute or so to just get yourself settled. And when you're relatively comfortable, close the eyes and notice what additional wiggles or fidgets or adjustments are needed to become a little more comfortable still. And then bring awareness into the lower body, so the pelvis, the legs, and the feet. And invite the lower body to become a bit heavier. So notice if you're holding, almost as though you're trying to levitate. And instead, let the opposite be true and allow yourself to root and to rest. With this stable, comfortable foundation for your posture, invite the spine to grow slowly and gradually longer and taller, almost like the stem of a flower, delicately reaching skyward. Invite the shoulders to soften and to rest heavily on top of the ribs. And soften the muscles of the face as well. Forehead, eyebrows, the muscles around the eyes grow soft and the eyes themselves grow still, almost as though they're drawing the tiniest bit further back into the head as they release their desire to perceive the external world and replace that with a softening toward the internal. We release any tension around the nostrils. Soften the lips and the tongue and the jaw. Give yourself a few breaths to just enjoy this sense of relief that can come from letting go of the mask that we wear as we engage with the external world. Letting go of who we believe the external world requires us to be. And begin the journey home. Start to pay attention to the breath. Just a simple coming and going. And before controlling or shaping the breath in any way, just notice whatever there is to notice. What parts of the body are moving with the breath? What is the pace of the breath? How balanced are the inhales and the exhales? Are there any pauses or gaps in the breath? How smooth and how steady is the breath? Are there any underlying tremors or quivers? Maybe coming from the area of the belly or the area of the heart. Drop awareness now into the belly. And see if you can bring stillness to the rest of the body. And just observe a gentle movement, an expansion and a release in the belly as the body breathes. It can be helpful to cross the arms low across the belly. Place the palms of the hands on the side body, in that fleshy space between the ribs and the pelvis. And then let the weight of the arms rest on the belly. And now notice how the belly expands into the arms as the body inhales. And how everything softens and releases as the body exhales. No unnecessary tension in the shoulders or hands. Ever blossoming ease. Just the tiniest bit of mental engagement. Invite the breath to grow even. So the inhales and the exhales are equal in length. Almost as though you could time the breath to the heartbeat. Two or three heartbeats for the inhale. And the same for the exhale. Adding one more simple layer to this practice, an internal repetition of a very simple but very powerful mantra, the mantra Om. And how we'll practice it. As inhales, pardon me. This is our little mascot. As the body inhales, hear and feel almost a yawning sensation accompanied by the sound of ah. And as the body exhales, hear and feel the sound of So on inhale, hearing, feeling the sound of ah, A-U. And on exhale, hearing and feeling the sound a little less effort, a little less doing for another minute or two. Even softer, letting go of the need for it to be perfect or right, and allow it to be whatever you need. Stay with the breath, but release the arms. And just notice if everything becomes a little bit easier, a little more free. Three more breaths and let go of yet another layer of tension or holding. ready, give yourself a more full inhale. And let it go. Bring the palms together if you'd like. Begin to rub the hands briskly, generating a sense of presence or warmth between the hands. And then place the hands gently over the eyes for another breath or two. Take stock of the inner world. And then when it feels right to you, allow the eyes to begin to blink open as you transition at least a part of your consciousness back to the outer world. Let the hands move away from the face, slowly, slowly. And welcome back. So stay in that space a little bit, and I'm just going to read the very first page or two from my teacher's commentary on the Yoga Sutras. This is commentary on the very first of the Yoga Sutras in the first chapter. Now begins the instruction on the practice of yoga. Patanjali begins his discourse on yoga with the long-held conviction of the sages that a human being is an island of excellence. To be born as a human is the greatest achievement, and to die without knowing the essence of life is the greatest loss. The immense wisdom and power buried in our body and mind is clear evidence that nothing is beyond our reach. No other creature has a brain and nervous system as evolved as ours. The retentive power of our mind is unmatched. Our ability to comprehend time, space, and the law of cause and effect, as well as our ability to store our experiences non-sequentially and retrieve them both sequentially and non-sequentially, places us above all other living beings. Our boundless intelligence and power of discernment give us access to the infinitely vast universe inside us and outside us. Nothing is impossible for us. We are extraordinary beings, individual islands of excellence. The key to understanding, discovering the full scope of our excellence lies in understanding our mind and attaining mastery over it. The mind is the greatest of all mysteries. A clear, calm, one-pointed, friendly mind puts all the treasures of the world at our disposal. But a mind that has become dense, agitated, scattered, confused, and unfriendly robs us of our most fundamental privilege, our indomitable will to excel and achieve what only humans have the capacity to achieve. Unveiling the mystery of the mind is the core of yoga philosophy and practice. Unveiling this mystery is the most fulfilling and auspicious of all human endeavors, a fact Patanjali expresses with the first word of this sutra, atta. In Sanskrit literature, atta indicates an auspicious beginning. It conveys a feeling of sanctity and is used as an invocation. In our tradition, atta embodies this and much more. Ours is a tradition of Sakti Sadhana. More precisely, the esoteric path of Sakti Sadhana, known as the tradition of Sri Vidya. The Yoga Sutra is one of the most significant texts in the Sri Vidya tradition, and Patanjali is one of the cardinal masters. Teachers in our tradition take pride in elaborating on the unique meaning of atta, both in conjunction with the next word yoga and with chitti, shaktihi, and iti, which are the last two words in the Yoga Sutra. In the tradition of Sri Vidya, atta is expressive of the self-luminous guiding intelligence residing in all of us. This inner luminosity constitutes the core of our island of excellence. It is the divine in us. Eternal and all-pervading, it is the principle of immortality, which awakens us from the slumber of death, brings us back to life, and guides us on the path of complete fulfillment and ultimate freedom. It is the vibrant, ever-awakened power of consciousness, our final destination. It is the beginning of our quest, as well as its culmination. So, first couple pages of the first sutra in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, and that's enough to completely transform our entire life. So we've got a lot to work with. We've got so much that's available to us. If we can take advantage of just the first page, our life can be transformed, and we're still just scratching the surface. It is the gift that will continue giving for the rest of this life, and most likely for many, many more lives to come. So why not dive in and start to receive the gifts that are being so generously offered to us? So that is the nature of what we're about with this training. It is, yes, a yoga teacher training. At the end of this, you will definitely be certified to teach, share, guide yoga, but more, so much more than that. It's really about stepping very boldly onto your own unique spiritual path and sort of relentlessly doing what is necessary to make your way home to yourself so that you can navigate all of the craziness of the external world with peace, clarity, compassion, and love. And if we manage that, if we manage to even begin on the path in a meaningful way, which will be a foundation for you to continue on that path for years to come, then we will have been wildly successful. Yeah. So I'm going to read a tiny bit more from a different book. Both of these books are written by my teacher, who is Pandit Rajmani Tiganayat, and he is the spiritual head of the Himalayan Institute and thus the spiritual head of the Himalayan tradition. And in order to give a little bit of context on what that means, that's what I'm going to read the tiniest bit of, so that you can start to understand what is the structure in which we're studying yoga and tantra. And we'll get into what is yoga and what is tantra quite a lot more in depth in the training, but suffice it to say that yoga is the means for mastering our minds. And it's a very systematic, almost scientific process that is like a scientific approach to spirituality, if that makes sense, because it gives you something tangible to do and then something tangible to place your faith in as a result of that doing. So you do something and there's an actual result that you can see and feel and touch and observe. And that's what you put your faith in. And then that gives you the guts to do a little more and then put your faith in the result of that. So it's systematic, scientific, and yet spiritual at its core. And then there's Tantra. And Tantra is basically methodology for managing energy. And it can be applied in so many different ways. And there are so many different cultures, ethical backdrops, so many different reasons why you might apply Tantra. We're applying it specifically to our practice of yoga. So Tantra comes in and it essentially empowers our quest, which is the quest of yoga. And it gives us access to so much more of our own power and so much more of the power that is available in the world around us. And we start to see and feel and experience the relationship between the two in a really in a really real way. And Tantra also, besides accelerating our path, accelerating our progress or our process, it does so in a way which reveals to us just how beautiful it all is. So again, we live in a society that is simultaneously trying to convince us that everything is broken and flawed, and that we are as well, and that everything is somehow ugly or wrong, so that it can sell us the things to try to bring us back to an experience of beauty. And Tantra is helping us to realize that even in the things that appear to be ugly, damaged, broken, flawed, if we look closely enough, if we peel back the layers of illusion, confusion, and ignorance, everything is beautiful. And it's all just as it's supposed to be. And that's something that Tantra helps to plant a seed of, and then nourish that seed until it grows, until it becomes our experience of reality. I'm feeling, I must have slept really well last night, because like the stuff's coming out really easily today. Sometimes I have to really struggle to get the words, but maybe my meditation practice this morning was extra powerful or something. Who knows? All right, so I'm going to read just a tiny bit from this book, which is The Himalayan Masters. So there's a book called Living with the Himalayan Masters, which is sort of a paradigm shifting adventure of a book. And then this one gives us a lot of the direct discourse, the direct teachings of a handful of the sages from our tradition. So this is just a couple pages from the introduction, so we can start to get a little bit of an understanding of what the Himalayan tradition is and who it is. At first glance, there seem to be many separate yoga traditions, but in reality, there is only one. The tradition that includes all and excludes none. The tradition of the highest truth. This truth is not influenced by time and place, nationality, or race. It is eternal. It remains undisturbed and independent of the whims of society and its transient fashions. It is without boundaries or limitations, and it is not confined to any particular region. Sincere seekers and teachers in this tradition are not bound by limitations of nationality or geography, or by the fetters of personal ego, ignorance, attachment, aversion, or fear. In this light, the tradition of the Himalayan masters is not so much about a geographical location as it is about the heights of spiritual wisdom everywhere. Our best modern-day scientists and engineers have designed machines to examine all aspects of the external world, from the smallest microbes to distant galaxies, seeking to discover the secrets of the universe. In millennia past, great spiritual researchers focused the power and creativity of their minds on the inner space of their own beings, seeking to discover the full potential of human nature. By using their finely trained, disciplined, and concentrated minds as their tool of exploration, they made their discoveries in the laboratories of their own bodies and minds. Human civilization is ancient, far older than any recorded history, and it has passed through many cycles of development and decline. Even the oral tradition gives us only sketchy information about the chronological time when these sages lived and began their work. For example, Shankaracharya, the great yogi and philosopher, formally established the tradition of the Himalayan masters 1200 years ago. But the written record of this tradition first appears much earlier in the Vedic literature. The Chandogya Upanishad, compiled in approximately 900 BC, records more than 60 generations in an unbroken lineage of sages. So even if we assign only 25 years to each generation, this would take us back to the year 2400 BC. But according to the oral tradition, the history of the lineage dates back at least 5,000 years, and perhaps more than 10,000. The lineage of the Himalayan sages is not known precisely, especially in its earliest stages. And some of the ancient masters taught so many different disciplines to students over such a long span of time, and have been credited with such extraordinary spiritual wisdom and power, that it is difficult to believe they were even living human beings. But they were. Free thinkers and explorers of the highest truth. They were the architects of human civilization. The philosophers, saints, and yogis who came later built upon their blueprint of spirituality. So that's where this is coming from. It's rooted in thousands of years of self-exploration. And they have discovered quite a lot that they get to share with us. And then they share with us the means and the methods for making those discoveries on our own as well. So that's what we are endeavoring to begin to explore through this training. I want to pause now and just open up to any questions or reflections before I share a few more of like the nitty-gritty details of what the training is going to actually contain for you. And hi, Tiana. I see you. We've been joined by Tiana, who is officially my sister-in-law now.
Hi.
Hi. It's nice to have you here. Thanks for being here. So does anyone have any questions or reflections or anything you'd like to add?
I have a question I wanted to ask about the flexibility of this like yoga style. Like, how is it to, if you want to bring your own personal style into this, because this is also something like which I think which is so important, because if you are participating into yoga classes or if you're watching videos on YouTube, like, yeah, there are all these movements, they're all kind of the same, but I think like there's this personal thing is often missing. So this is what I wanted to ask, if this is implemented or how this is implemented.
That is such a good question, Sophia. And I doubt most people looking for a teacher training would even think to ask that question. So I'm glad that you're bringing it up, because it's something that's really important to me as well. The way that like the catchphrase that I use is that we're rooted in tradition with room for innovation. So you get to sink your roots into something that is time tested, that we know is effective and meaningful. But you then have to experience it on your own, feel it in your own body, practice the meditations, experience the actual effect of all of these practices and techniques and philosophies and all of it. And then once you've experienced it and embodied it, you then express it in the way that is natural to you. So once it lives in you, you then can take all of the different strategies and tactics and techniques that we're going to share with you on how to structure a class, all of those different things. And then you start to make it your own, and you share it in a way that feels meaningful to you. And then the impact of that is that you're going to attract the students to you that, for whatever reason, need to learn it in the way that you share it. The last thing that Chrissy and I are trying to do is to create cookie cutters of ourselves, because I like being the only Natalie. Chrissy's the only Chrissy, and you get to be the only Sophia. And the way that you share, if you give yourself permission for it to come into you and then be expressed through you, it's just going to have so much more potency than if you try to filter it. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great. So it's like about creating like a frame, let's say, and with room for innovation. Like,
Yeah.
so to say.
And the way that I've studied with my teacher, my teacher's teacher, and my teacher's teacher's teacher,
Okay.
in terms of like the structure of how a class is put together, it looks really different. They all teach very differently, but the core of what they're teaching is leading to is the yoga.
Mhm.
So we keep our mind and our heart focused on the why of it, the essence. What are we trying to guide people to? And then how we get there. There's so many different ways, to get there. So we will provide you with technique and whatnot so that you feel like you've got a good understanding and you've got a good structure to work with. And then once that structure is in place, then you start bringing in the elements of freedom. You start weaving in, how does this live in me? And how do I share from this place? My recent group of graduates from the teacher training, they all went through the exact same training at the exact same time. And the way that they teach and share is totally different because they're totally different human beings.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's also about the people you want to attract, or I mean, actually, like every human being has its own topic, which is preventing it actually to develop. So yeah, there need to be different styles to teach it, right? I think because the blocks we all have are so different.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I would rather invest our time together in a really meaningful understanding of the why
Yeah.
of what yoga actually is and why we practice it and why it's effective, than invest all that time and energy in the how of you must teach this way. Because then we're totally caught up in the external and we miss the point. So there's a blend of both because I want to make sure that you feel prepared at the end of our time together to create practices and share them, whether that's for yourself or with a group of people. But I also want you to feel like this is living in you and that over time it's going to live in you more and more and more. And as your experience with all of these teachings continues to develop, the way that you share them will continue to develop as well. So you're not stuck in one particular structure or format. It gets to grow as you grow.
Good.
Yeah. Good question.
And then I have another one. It's like, so this training is like for 10 months and we will meet like once a month for a whole weekend. And like, how is it in between? Like, as far as I understood, we will also get like some, like maybe exercises, or I don't know, like some like things to do in between to to develop and to reflect maybe more.
Yes.
And like, if there are any questions or if there's any need to some help, like how is this managed?
Yeah. So additional structure is that 2 weeks after each training, so mid-month, there will be like a mentorship group. And so half of the trainees will meet with Chrissie and the other half will meet with me. And then after 5 months, we'll switch so that you have, and that's kind of unstructured time so that you can just get together with one of us, reflect on how things are going for you with your practice, with your study, any questions that have arisen, any concerns you might have, and just be able to chat like this and try to get some of those questions answered or any additional support. So that's one aspect of it. We'll also be giving you practices each month that will ask you to continue practicing on your own. So there will be at least one complete practice, which consists of asana, shavasana, pranayama, and meditation. And that would be something that you could adopt as your daily practice if you wanted to. And I would suggest that you do it a minimum of 3 times a week so that it has a chance to start to live in you. And then there will also be some additional things that are more technique oriented that will ask you to become quite comfortable with so that you could then teach it. And so there's kind of like those two different things that you'll get. And then in addition to that, there will be a knowledge assessment after each module, which is open book. And it's really just a way for you to go back through the module and pull out the things that I feel are the most important for you to remember, because there's so much information that it can be a little bit overwhelming. So my intention with that knowledge assessment is to highlight, out of all of that stuff that you just were exposed to, these are the key takeaways. So go back through and find those. And then the good news is that the test that you take at the end of the 10 months is basically just all the questions from all of the knowledge assessments again. And again, it's open book, because I don't want you to try to cram to memorize things. What I encourage instead is for you to recognize that this is a lifelong process, that we never stop studying, we never stop going back and checking our resources. And so that's the way that that's structured. In addition to that, there will be some recommended reading. So if you're one of those people that is just like, I can't get enough of this stuff, then I'll keep you busy. I'll give you as much as you can possibly wish for. But I'm making it recommended. Some reading will be required, but I'll try to keep that a little bit more succinct so that it's not completely overwhelming. And then there'll be recommended reading as well. So if you're really interested in this topic, here are a couple of other books or podcasts or whatever that you can explore that are going to help to flesh out your understanding of it. And then in addition to that, one final component for anyone who's genuinely interested in teaching, because I know a lot of people will go through the training that don't ever want to teach at the end of this. They're just doing it for themselves. But for the folks that do know that they want to be certified to teach at the end, there will be a practice teaching assignment. So it'll be whatever that technique is that Chrissie or I have asked you to become familiar with. I'll then ask you to submit a recording. It can be an audio recording or a video recording of you teaching that technique, so that right out of the gate, you're starting to get comfortable with, how do I teach? How do I use my voice? How do I use my body? Where does Sophia or Tiana come alive in the way that I share these practices? Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. So and this video record would then also be like reflected, and we can talk about it. And you
absolutely, yeah. And Tiana, I think you do say that answered your question as well.
Yeah, that answered my question as well. So that was perfect.
Yay! Good. Good.
Well, through your explanation, because I am doing this. I'm not really necessarily interested in the teaching aspect. I mean, that can obviously, things change as you do things and all that stuff and go through the training. I'm more interested in it for myself. But yeah, so that's kind of what I was going to ask. So cool.
So I'm going to just share my screen really quickly because I love having like visuals. So I like to have something I can look at while I'm going through some of the details. So make sure it's ready to be shared. There it is. And this is available it's just on my website. So this is available for you to go back and look through at any point in time, but it's going to give you like a home base for how the weekends are broken up and the time commitment and all of that stuff. Also, if you click on this little button, that's going to give you some practices that you can enjoy. So if you want to start practicing with Chrissie and myself prior to the training starting, those are there for you. And this will just give you a little bit more info about what the heck we're doing here and why. This was our last, actually, this is a graduate from the last round of the teacher training. Her name is Jenny, and she's just like magical. And she is very articulate in expressing the impact that the training had in her life. So if you're interested in that, that's available to you as well. And then here are the modules of what we'll actually be studying. So the first weekend, we're going to endeavor to begin to answer the question, what is yoga. So we'll be looking at the Yoga Sutras, and we'll be looking specifically at the sutras that are contained in chapter 2, which is Sadhanapada. That's the chapter on practice specifically. And those sutras outline what is known as Ashtanga yoga, not Ashtanga yoga like the branded version of Ashtanga yoga by, is it Patabi Joyce? I think that's Patabi Joyce, yeah. Ashtanga meaning 8-limbed yoga. So it's the 8 limbs of yoga, which are the yamas and niyamas, which are essentially the ethical tenets of yoga. Asana, which are the physical postures. Pranayama, the way that we work with breath in order to manage our energy. Pratyahara, the way that we're able to withdraw our senses from engagement with the external world to a much more internal focus. Dharana, which is concentration. So how do we start to concentrate the mind to bring it to a single point of focus? Dhyana, which is meditation. How do we then turn that single point of focus into an absorption with the object of meditation, so the object of our focus? And then samadhi, which is what we're all ultimately aiming for, which is absorption with something higher than ourself, which actually reveals the true nature of the self. So there's weekend 1. Again, we could study that for the rest of our lives easily. we're gonna do it in a weekend. Module 2, we're going to start exploring structure for our practices right away. So wise progression, vinyasa krama. That's essentially the methodology that we use to create practices for ourselves. So we're going to start looking at the whys of that as well as the how of that. In module 3, we'll start working with what is called the subtle body. So we're all pretty familiar with the gross body, which is the physical body, everything we can see and touch and taste and experience through the senses. The subtle body is the next layer of that, which consists predominantly of our breath and our breath body and the energy that the breath can help to govern and influence in the body, as well as the mind. So we're going to start looking at the relationship between the breath and the mind, and then how that overlays or underlays the physical body. So just starting to explore who we are on a more energetic, subtle, and spiritual level. Module 4, prana. I'm tempted to say it's my favorite module, but I know when I get like lower down on the list, I'm going to say that again because there are so many that are my favorites. But prana is essentially, that's what gives us a direct experience of the divine, pure consciousness, the universe, like whatever word you like to use to describe the energy that connects all of us to one another and to every other being or entity in all of creation. Prana is what is present in all of it. And by virtue of us being tantric practitioners of yoga, we have techniques and can develop skill around working directly with prana in order to achieve very specific objectives that are going to support and accelerate our spiritual path. It's when the magic really starts to get layered in. Meditation. So we'll spend a whole module just exploring tantric meditation, and we're going to specifically look at a method of meditation known as Vishoka meditation. This doesn't prepare you or certify you to teach Vishoka meditation, but it begins to prepare you to practice it on your own and determine whether or not you might want to pursue becoming certified to teach that at some point in the future. But it's a really beautiful approach to meditation, which has the power in and of itself to be transformative. Module 6, anatomy. So we're going to take a closer look at the physical body. I like to work with anatomy after we already have worked with the subtle body, because the subtle body is really so much more important in terms of tantric practices. So once we've got an understanding of how that works, then we go back to the more physical gross matter of the physical body and start to figure out how can we structure the physical body in a way that supports the subtle body and helps us to progress on our path. Module 7, Ayurveda and self-care. So Ayurveda is essentially the sister science to yoga, where yoga is very oriented toward the mind and the spirit. Ayurveda is a little bit more oriented toward the body. And so Ayurveda is what helps us bring our body back into balance so that it is as healthy a vehicle for us to be able to then move forward on our spiritual pursuits. We look at the foods that we're eating, we look at the way that we manage our energy throughout the day, the way that we manage our energy throughout the year as we cycle through the different seasons. There are lots of different things that we'll take a peek at, including some self-care rituals that are Ayurvedic in nature and that help us to begin to value ourselves so much more as a temple or a home for something that is genuinely sacred. Basically the self, that you are sacred and you need to start treating yourself that way. There's my preaching for the day. All right, module 8 is Tantra. So at this point, we'll already have a pretty solid foundation of Tantra, but in this module, we're going to go in and actually explore the history of Tantra, the different branches of Tantric yoga, and start to explore a little bit more of how we can categorize our understanding of the way that Tantra works into different approaches to yoga practice. So that becomes sort of technical as well, in the sense that it's going to give you the means to assess where you are in your life. Could be just that day, could be that season, it could be that decade, and then how to create the appropriate practice to address your needs in that moment. And Tantra is going to give us, the Tantric approach to yoga is going to give us a lot of that methodology. Module 9 is living Dharma. So Dharma can be defined in a few different ways. One way is that Dharma is universal truth. And when we align ourselves and our lives to universal truth, then we are living aligned with Dharma. And by virtue of being aligned with Dharma, we're living the very best version of ourself and of our life. So we can explore the nature of universal truth through the lens of exploring our own individual truth. Because if we can really peel away all the layers of should and all of the beliefs around our limitations, what we can and cannot do, what we're capable of or not capable of, what society wants from us, what our families want from us, versus what our soul is deeply desiring. When we can start to tune into the soul's desire, that desire is trying to pull us into alignment with Dharma. It is our soul's unique reason for being at this time in this body. And when we can attune ourselves to that purpose, to that desire of the soul, everything starts to make sense and life becomes easier, far more rewarding, far more fulfilling. And when we're living our best life in alignment with Dharma, we are doing the very best that we could possibly do to support Dharma. So the basic belief system is that by finding out what our soul's true desire is and living according to it, we are a vessel of service to the rest of the world. And that to me is like a mind-blowing concept, because so much of the time we're taught that we have to sacrifice, give up the things that we want, give up the things that we feel we really would love to do or be or experience in order to be of service or fit into what society wants and needs from us. And this is kind of blowing that idea out of the water and saying, actually, by tending to your heart and soul's deepest yearnings and desires, you're becoming the version of yourself that you're meant to be. So you are then contributing to the world and to all of creation in exactly the way that only you can, and helping to bring everything in creation back into alignment. It's pretty esoteric. So we're going to look at some of the nitty-gritty ways of assessing what is it that I really want on a few different levels. And then how can I figure out the belief systems that are keeping me from actually pursuing what I want? So what's pulling me away from that? How can I disempower those belief systems and empower my commitment to becoming the best version of myself that I could ever possibly be? So we'll be doing that as well. And module 10, this one I could also say is my favorite, Bhakti and Mantra. So with Bhakti, we're starting to explore the concept of devotion and love as our guiding principle in how we approach not only our practice, but our life. And there are lots of different ways that Bhakti can manifest and come alive in our lives. Devotion can be to any number of different concepts, ideas, objects, or entities. So that's a really juicy thing to explore. And then mantra sadhana is the heartbeat of the Sri Vidya tradition. It's the pinnacle of practice. All roads of the Himalayan tradition lead to mantra. So we'll be starting to learn mantras day one of module 1, so that you have a chance to memorize and embody a few really powerful mantras over the course of the training. And then in the final mantra, or the final module, pardon me, we'll explore a little bit more of what mantra actually is, why it's so powerful, how you could pursue initiation at some point if you wanted to, and then how we can make it the pinnacle and the core of our practice going forward, and why we would want to. So that's what we're going to be studying. It's a lot. It's kind of like an introduction to each of these areas, enough that you will feel as though you can weave your knowledge into your teaching, and also enough that you will recognize how very little you know, so that there's the constant invitation to explore more. And then down here, we've got the time commitment. So, I need to change up here. Don't look at that part. Look at what I've actually modified, because I have adjusted the time schedule a little bit. So here are the dates. You can take a peek at that. It's just on Saturdays and Sundays. It's a little early for anybody on the Pacific Coast, Tiana and myself, on Saturdays and Sundays, but that's in order to accommodate these other time zones. So it's not quite as late in the UK and in Europe as it was originally. Saturday mornings, we're always going to begin with a practice. So if you can't wake up at 4 a.m., that's okay. You can come back and do the practice at a later time. We want people to be present as much as possible, but we also recognize that life is life and things are going to pop up. So when things pop up, if you need to make some adjustments, then just notify us and we'll find another way to help you to be accountable to the learning. So you have maybe an extra little bit of check-in, an extra little bit of assessment, just to make sure that you really take yourself through each portion of the training. I do know you well, Tiana. I know as soon as I said that, I was like, uh-oh, Tiana's going to be like, what have I done? And on Sundays at 4 a.m., we'll always begin with a little bit of a conversation around how are things going? Where do we want to check in? What questions do we want to answer? That kind of a thing. So there won't be quite as much like intensive content right at the beginning of the day. And then everything will be recorded. And it usually just takes me about 2 hours to get the recordings online at the most. Tends to be closer to 30 minutes. So you'll have a chance to catch up even between the first day and the second, if you need that. If you want to learn more about myself or about Chrissie, you can find that information here as well. And if you decide that this does feel like where your heart and soul wants to be for the next 10 months, this is a way that you can take it to the next step. So you click this little button right here, and that's going to take you to the application. And the application is more than anything an opportunity for Chrissie and me to get to know you a little bit better, so that we have a better understanding of where you're coming from in terms of who you've studied with before, the approach of yoga that you're most comfortable and familiar with, and what it is that you're really hoping to get out of the training, what you think might be your biggest obstacle, and then just kind of looking through and being able to make a commitment. So you'll make that commitment to yourself first and foremost. And when sometimes just by writing it down, like, are you committed to this? Yes, I am, heightens something in your mind. So there's that. And then one thing I forgot to mention is the module on Dharma will actually be taking place in Italy. So if you can't come to Italy, that's okay, because it'll also be held virtually. So if you're not able to come join us on retreat, not a problem. If you are able to, amazing. So though that week there'll be a little bit more time dedicated to Dharma, because there's a lot for us to unpack. And it's a beautiful way to do that, hopefully in person, but if not in person, you can create kind of your own at-home retreat experience. Yes, I will get to that. There are absolutely payment plans available. I try to make this as accessible as it can possibly be for people, because while Chrissie and I do need to make a living, that's not why either of us actually teach yoga. We have to make a living so we can keep teaching yoga, but we teach yoga because it's part of what our soul was put into this body at this time to do. So we'll figure out how to make it work, how to make it possible for everybody. So with the retreat, the total is 4,108. Without the retreat, it's 3,108. $108 is going to be donated to a humanitarian project that together as a community, we're going to decide where that money goes. So even if you receive a scholarship and you pay less than the total amount, I'll still pull 108 of whatever it is that you're able to pay. And then halfway through, sometime before the end of the training, we'll discuss together, where do we think this money should go? And then we'll make an offering together as a group. And then ideally, $608 is your deposit to hold the spot. And then you can either pay in full before the training starts, or you can opt for a payment plan. And the payment plans can be either 10 months or 12 months. If it's 10 months, if you're doing the retreat, that would be 4,108. Your deposit would be 608. So then you're looking at $3,500 left to pay. If you did that over 10 months, for example, it would be $350 each month until we're finished. So that's the most expensive option. And then if you were going to not do the retreat, then it would be $608 deposit and then $250 every month going forward from there. If you're unsure about the retreat, you could go for the $3,108 option. And then if you want to add the retreat on at the last minute, as long as, so the retreat dates are November 7th through 12th. So I would say if you can pay by the 1st of October, then we should be fine. So if you want to be sort of on the fence about the retreat between now and then, that's okay. And then if there's still room available, which I think that there will be, then you could just pay the $1,000 for the retreat and be able to join the group. Autopay is available. Yeah. We can either do invoices, where my assistant will send an invoice at the beginning of each month, and you can either pay via PayPal or Venmo if you're in the US, or through TransferWise if that feels more comfortable internationally. There's also via the online course platform that I use, Stripe. So we can get you set up with Stripe, and then you can it'll just automatically deduct your payments. So whatever you're comfortable with is what we can explore. Final bit of information there. I do make scholarships available. So if you really feel like this is what you're supposed to be doing, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so I can look at your faces. If you really feel like this, you're being called to this experience, and the only thing that's standing in your way is the finances, then what I'll ask you to do is look at what is possible for you. If you had 10 months and you could stretch it out over 10 months, is $150 a month sustainable? Is $200 a month sustainable? And going to be a genuine reflection of the value that you place on the content and on our time, and not going to create unnecessary stress or a burden in your life, that it's something that you feel like is honoring the content, but is also honoring where you are in your life at this point in time. So I'll ask you to do a little bit of personal reflection on that, and then come to me with a proposal. And that is a stress-inducing thing sometimes, but what I have found is that it just helps you own where you are right now a little bit and ask for support, knowing that I'm going to say yes. Because a lot of the time we need to know I have the freedom, I have the power to ask for support. And it's important that I do that when I need it. And then when you're asking that tough question, getting a positive response can be very healing for a lot of us, especially around finances. So that's why I do it that way. And I'll just put out there that I have been the recipient of, I don't know how many scholarships at this point in my life. I get scholarships right, left, and center. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so committed to making sure that I offer them as much as I possibly can as well. So that's it. Any other questions, comments, concerns besides the 4 a.m.?
So not from my side so far. It was very, very interesting. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Very welcome. My pleasure. And the last thing that I'll say before I let everyone go is if you do have additional questions, Chrissy and I are both happy to set up a one-on-one conversation. So you can just send an email. And if there's more that you want to discuss that maybe you don't want to share with everybody, just reach out and we'll figure out like a 30-minute chunk of time that we can go through whatever's on your mind.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Chrissy, I've done all the talking today. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it was so perfect. I'm just really excited, and yeah, if you're feeling the call, I encourage you to follow it. I've always done that impulse. Sometimes we don't need to know why, and I've always been held when I follow the thread of that answer. So yeah, these teachings have nourished my life so much, and they continue to do so, and it would be an honor to share it with you guys.
Thanks, love.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful remainder to your day or evening. And I hope to hear from you.